That was their first impulse, kind of like Soviet Russia did. Anything that's communistic, do away with it. They just started destroying things without any system to take it over. Later on, as the general level of the masses was raised, it would be easy enough to get rid of the tyrant. That's what they figured. Put a tyrant in power and we'll throw the rascal out later. After all, the 7th and 6th centuries, the centuries of the tyrants, were an age of questioning, and the critical faculties of the Greeks were hardly limited to literature and art. The age of the tyrants was a flowering age of intellectualism. Kind of like the kings of Western Europe that patronized philosophers and painters and so forth. The tyrant's power rested ultimately upon the people, and therefore he ruled in their interest. This frequently meant a ruthless attack upon the nobles. Aside from this, however, the tyrants maintained the civil law as they found it. We saw that earlier. Just took over, new government, same law. By undertaking great public works, they increased prosperity. Baloney. No force in the Greek world contributed so much to cultural progress because of patronage of the arts. The tyrant's patronage attracted poets, painters, sculptors, and architects who formed in his court a brilliant and versatile society. But by undertaking great public works, they increased prosperity. Well, it depends upon what they mean by public works, like a new harbor facility, maybe. But like a temple? No. By thus fostering literary interest, by patronizing artists and poets, literary interest among the people, and by attaching them to newer cults, the tyrants freed them in a degree from the priestly influence of the old nobility and educated them for self-government. Let's rephrase that. The Greeks occasionally adopted new religions. They started new religions up. What the hell? Why not? Let's have a new one. And this was accepted in the culture at the time. That's a better way to state that. Among the great tyrants were those of Asia Minor, Ephesus and Miletus, and the neighboring islands Mytilene and Lesbos and Samos. Although the dictator on Samos, the dictator Pittacus of Mytilene was a dictator, a magistrate appointed for a definite term. Then he was out. They said, we'll give you 10 years and then you're done. So he wasn't really a tyrant. He didn't seize power, they put him in power. And gave him tyrant's power. Weird situation. Mytilene, M-Y-T-I-L-E-N-E, 585 to 75 is the years he was in power. The tyrant par excellence, Thrasybulus of Miletus, is now unfortunately an obscure figure. His rise was due to the Lydian danger. The presence of a foreign enemy helps to explain why under certain circumstances there was a lessening of colonization, for the people were needed at home. Their Marxist interpretations never stick together, because then that would mean the colonists who were oppressed and unhappy stay at home more when there was a danger of war. I mean, why would that be true? I don't think they left because of discontentedness. But anyways, so Thrasybulus of Miletus took power because of the rise of the Lydian danger. Skip down a bit. The famous Periander, heartless though he was in his treatment of the nobles, Periander was in other ways a wise and moderate ruler. Under him, an important city in the Chalcidice, Potidaea, was founded. By checking the importance of slaves, he assured to skilled workmen a better social standing than this class enjoyed elsewhere. It's one of the reasons some people give in the North, United States of America, the North was racist against the South because they didn't want the poor blacks to come up there and lower down the wages and so on, which ultimately is not wise policy. But anyways, supposedly he checked the power of slaves in his city-state and raised social standing of workmen. As market and harbor customs sufficed for the needs of government, the citizens were relieved of direct taxes, kind of like in the United States in the 1800s. Luxury, power, and brilliance characterized Corinth. During his long reign, his grasp weakened, and 3 years after his death, the tyranny was overthrown by a band of conspirators. Next in brilliance among the early Greek tyrannies was that at Sicyon, founded by the non-Dorian Oregoras, 656 BC. The city of Sicyon lay northwest of Corinth, in the narrow but fertile valley of the Asopus. Skipping down a bit. Of the ascendants of Atharagus was Cleisthenes. Now remember that name, Cleisthenes, Cleisthenes, 600 to 560 BC. We'll see that name again. There are different Cleisthenes. This is like George Bush or whatever, you know. Cleisthenes made Sicyon one of the most magnificent cities in Greece. His first effort was to free Sicyon from the political control which Argos, hitherto, had excised over it. This object he accomplished in a successful war. To free his countrymen from religious dependence on their former master, he expelled from the city the cult of Adrastus, an Argive hero. Remember, as we saw earlier, just someone who founded a colony could have a cult formed and they would be worshipped after their death. And just heroes could have cults formed and be worshipped. But the incident of Adrastus illustrates the singular importance of hero cults among the early Greeks. On the whole, skipping quite a bit of Marxist stuff, on the whole, tyrannies were short-lived, though for special reasons. Asia Minor was an exception. They had long-lived tyrannies. Asia Minor, right there on the edge of Persia. Maybe. Persia, as she advanced to the seaboard, found tyranny a surer method of controlling the Greeks. So when Persia took over, it was always tyranny that they incorporated. But in spite of the fact that the sons and grandsons of tyrants became corrupted by wealth and power, and so degenerated as to give the word tyrant its present meaning, despite all this, tyranny had performed great service. It was the transition point from the age of the Dark Age, the age of no writing at all. There was a transition. The tyrants were the transmission belt that brings us the Golden Age and democracy. Aristocracy had been destroyed. The base of wealth had been broadened, coinage, and intelligent patronage had been extended to the arts. Many states were now ready for democracy. But in the never-ending struggle between the few and the many, some states returned to oligarchy, albeit a more liberally constituted oligarchy than the earlier aristocracy. In this great period of colonial expansion and industrial development and social change, two states, Sparta and Athens, stand out. Their institutions and growth make an absorbing study. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now closer to being able to investigate Sparta and Athens, and we're going to figure out a little bit about the intellectual scene now. Rex Warner, The Greek Philosophers. This fabulous text we'll be taking a bit from now. I want to recommend, while on the subject, The Physical World of the Greeks by S. Sambursky, translated from the Hebrew by Merton Daggett. It's got about a paragraph of good stuff and then a paragraph of tripe, one and one, because it's heavily academic, but it's pretty good. Pretty good. You wade through it. Then Greek Science in Antiquity by Marshall Claggett. I have to recommend that. We'll be taking a bit from that later. Let's now go with Rex Warner and the Greek Philosophers. It's published in 1958. Now, what I want to do is give us a taste of the pre-Socratic philosophers from Ionia. And we're going to just do 6. We're just going to blow your crow. Going to look kind of closely at 3 of them and not too closely at the other 3. Then we'll be off and on to the next stage. The Greeks invented among other things science and philosophy. The first scientists and philosophers lived during the 6th century BC on the Greek coast of Asia Minor and in the Greek cities of southern Italy. Later, during the 5th and 4th centuries, the important center of thought was Athens. But by this time, science and philosophy were studied everywhere in the Greek world. These studies shaped the civilization of Rome, and